Hello, my name is Anna Morrow. I'm the program manager for the Midwest Cover Crops Council, and this is selecting cover crop species. This presentation was developed by Dr. Rob Myers at the University of Missouri and NCR SARE, reviewed by Dr. Dean Boss and Dr. Marisol Berti, and funded by the Walton Family Foundation. These training modules are available free for use. You can find those through the Center for Regenerative Ag at Missouri or the Midwest Cover Crops Council website. You can download the PowerPoint and share those. We just ask that you share credit. And these are made to be helpful instructional presentations that you can share at meetings. So there are many potential cover crops to choose from. This photo is a demonstration of several cover crop species on Steve Groff's farm in Pennsylvania, including some sun hemp there, flowering yellow in the back, Austrian winter peas, crimson clover, and faba beans. Cover crops can generally be described as plants used to protect and improve the soil, especially at times when no cash crop is being grown. So sometimes they're seeded into a living cash crop. So we're just going to work through some examples of cover crops today and some of the selection criteria that you might consider as you're making those decisions. This photo shows a field of crimson clover in late April in central Missouri. Crimson clover is one of the most popular legume cover crops nationally, although it generally does better in the southern half of the Corn Belt due to its winter hardiness. It can generally survive well in zone 6 or warmer, sometimes zone 5. Crimson clover survival, like most cover crops, is affected by planting date, getting adequate fall growth, and generally it will survive better if it gets at least 2 or 3 inches tall in the fall. So some factors to consider when selecting a cover crop. There are many things to consider, and so as farmers are considering all these different issues, they may become overwhelmed. There's a lot to consider, and so when you're talking with farmers who are just getting started in cover crops, it's usually helpful to suggest starting simple, something like cereal rye ahead of beans, and then getting more diverse, more complicated as you get more experience. So one factor to consider would be what time of year is the cover crop needed. So that will influence, your seeding dates, and the type of benefits that those cover crops are going to have for you. What are the goals for your cover crop use? So that is a major selection criteria. Are you looking for a legume that's going to provide nitrogen, or looking for erosion control, weed suppression? There's lots of different goals that you may have when you're looking at cover crops. Planting method may influence your decision. Some cover crop species really need to be drilled. Some of them do okay broadcast. Some of them are okay to fly out of an airplane. So that's another thing that needs to be considered. How easy is the cover crop to establish? Some are more difficult than others. What kind of soils are present? That may limit your options. If you have some tough soils, wet or clay pan, things like that could be a limiting factor on what species will work. What cash crops are in the rotation? So that's going to impact that those seeding questions of what time of year are we able to plant our cover crop, and what impacts might the cover crop have on our following cash crop. How much does the seed cost and how available is it? That's going to change quite a bit from year to year. And so we need to do that research ahead of time and know what seed availability and seed costs are, and what are some, secondary options if our first choice isn't available. So we'll work through all of those factors for cover crop selection in this presentation, and interspersed with those slides, we've just got some examples of cover crops, some photos, and some benefits and considerations of each of those species. So these are radishes. They can get an impressive amount of growth in the fall if they're planted timely, like mid to late August in the northern Corn Belt, maybe even to mid-September in the southern part of the Corn Belt. So this does restrict using radishes to something like after wheat, or other early harvested crops. But it is a good option. They're best known for their ability to develop a tuber that can help loosen compacted soils. But they also do a good job at sequestering nitrogen in the fall. Biology of the cover crop plant. So understanding the growth habit of the cover crop that you're selecting is going to make a big difference in the way that plant behaves and how it might be suited to your situation. So annuals typically are faster at getting established. Winter annuals start growth in fall and generally require a cold period to flower. Summer annuals will flower in a single growing season. Cool season annuals do best in either spring or fall, and warm season annuals will thrive in the heat of midsummer. Biennials grow on a 2-year cycle, so they normally start growth in the spring or summer of year 1 and don't flower and produce seed until the following year. So that's something like sweet clover. Perennials are plants that will live multiple years and they may flower every year. A weak perennial is something that will likely die after just a few years. Perennials are also generally much slower at the early above ground growth compared to annuals, and that's because they're putting a lot more of their energy down into the roots. So things have changed quite a bit over the years. This is a photo of yellow sweet clover. It was a very popular green manure crop that was overseeded into winter wheat in the spring and then allowed to grow after wheat harvest and then until the following spring when it was plowed down for soil improvement and some nitrogen fixation before the following corn plant. So yellow sweet clover is a biennial, which worked well under that system. In our typical cover crop situation these days, it might not fit quite as well as some other species that we've got. So something like a winter annual like crimson clover is going to give us faster growth and work better within our system. So that's just an example of 2 different cropping rotations and how a biennial versus an annual might work better or worse in those situations. Some cover crops work fine for either fall or spring planting. Some are better for just fall. And then there are another group of cover crops that need warm growing conditions and are considered summer or warm season annuals. So they're best planted in June and July. So you can see some examples of those on the screen there. And variety can also make a difference within those species as well. Okay, so what are your goals for the cover crop? This is really to help the farmer kind of zero in on what it is they're trying to accomplish with their cover crop. If you have multiple goals, then maybe a cover crop mixture would be a good way to go. But typically when farmers are just getting started, we'd like to focus on one key area and work on that goal with probably a single species, just to simplify management. So some examples of some goals that we may have for our cover crop are soil erosion reduction. So for something like that, we need a fast cover of the soil surface, good rooting, persistent growth, and that might be something like cereal rye or triticale. Soil compaction is another goal we may have. So for that, we're going to be looking for a deep-rooted cover crop or something with the taproot, like annual ryegrass, radish, sunflower. Nitrogen fixation is something that we're all very interested in. So that would be any of the legumes. So Austrian winter peas, crimson clover, red clover, hairy vetch, sun hemp, cowpeas. And then from there, you're going to have to look at, what time of year are you looking at planting and what are your management concerns there. Nitrogen sequestration, so holding that nitrogen in the soil after the cash crop and before the next cash crop. These are going to be things with typically with fibrous roots, so like cereal rye or other winter cereals. The brassicas, like radishes, are also pretty good at nitrogen sequestration. We may be looking at disease or nematode suppression. Any of the brassicas are a good option to consider for those type of goals. In general, we just want to recommend good rotation practices. So don't use a grass cover crop before a grass cash crop like corn. And similarly, avoid a legume cover crop before soybeans. So just keeping that rotation and changing the plant families that we use in a single field. Weed control, or I like to say weed management. Cereal rye is allelopathic to small-seeded broadleaf weeds. And then brassicas are also good at smothering winter annual weeds. So there's a few examples of some goals that we may have. And pollinator habitat. So things like buckwheat, sunflowers, and even diverse mixes will be good for those pollinators. This is a photo of oilseed radish. You can see that big tuber kind of sticking up out of the ground there. They will stick out of the ground a little bit, but for the most part, that tuber is below ground if we've got optimum growth. And that tuber could be a foot or more in length, but it really does extend well beyond the tuber going another 2 or 3 feet if we've got adequate fall growth. Really helping to break up some compaction and get some good infiltration. We really need to be mindful of planting date with radishes. They typically might not be this large in a traditional cover crop field, but it is a good option, and even those pencil-sized tubers are going to provide a lot of benefits when it comes to loosening the soil and helping with infiltration. What planting method will be used? So traditionally, most cover crop seed has been drilled. This is the best option to get good seed to soil contact pretty quickly. Or we could broadcast seed. When broadcasting, we want to remember that the larger the seed, the harder it is to get good seed to soil contact. So it may be more important to kind of rough up the soil surface, possibly roll or press the seed into the soil after broadcasting. And then aerial seeding works best with small seeded cover crops like radishes. We wouldn't use something large like a pea. Precision planters like a corn planter can work well if you've got a single or maybe even 2 species, but it doesn't work as well for a multi-way blend of cover crop seeds. Your planting method is often connected to your planting date. And some species are more important to plant early in the fall, like those radishes that we just talked about, than others. So cereal rye can handle a much later planting date. It's not as critical that we get it in the ground as timely as some of the other species. So using a row planter instead of a drill can allow some planting of alternate rows of different cover crop species. So in this photo, we've got radishes alternated with a winter cereal here. So the winter cereal will survive the winter holding onto the soil and nutrients, whereas the radishes will winter kill and create kind of a nice open strip where we can plant our corn or even soybeans in the following year. Some farmers might call this bio-strip till because the radish will winter kill and then decompose enough by the springtime to create a relatively residue-free strip to plant the cash crop into. Another consideration is how easy is the cover crop to establish. So this is going to be very important for those first-time cover crop users. The ease of establishment is based on the type of seed, method of seeding, timing of seeding, soil conditions, moisture, rainfall, all those kind of things. So in general, we would say that the easier to establish cover crops are things like crimson clover, cereal rye, oats, and wheat, triticale radishes, and other brassicas. Using a mix of cover crops, sometimes that can kind of improve our odds of success, especially if you're just broadcasting or disking it in. It's kind of a shotgun approach, right? We're taking a couple of different options and hoping that something will work. We always want to mention that buying clean, high quality seed and a good variety can make all the difference in success and establishment of a cover crop. So we need to be sure that we've tested the germination of the seed and we're looking for 85% or above. Sometimes a two-way mix of cover crops planted in the fall can improve the odds of success, since at least one of the covers is more likely to take hold. Again, it's that shotgun approach. In this case, the oats will winter kill, but they provide a nice scaffold for the hairy vetch to grow on. And also they're going to grow a lot more in the fall than the vetch. So that's going to provide us some cover, protect us against some soil erosion, improve that deeper rooting, and it'll also trap some winter snow. The oat residue can also increase the survival of the legume with that snow trapping that we mentioned, and then reducing the speed of cold winter winds if we don't have snow present. How hard is it to terminate a cover crop? This is something we want to take into consideration when we're selecting, so that we have a good plan for the spring ahead of cash crop planting, right? We want to make sure that we've made a good selection so that we don't cause any difficulties the following spring. This is something that a lot of farmers worry about, and we want to make sure that we're helping alleviate those concerns within the selection process. So there's several possible methods of control: herbicide tillage, mowing, roller crimping, grazing, and then of course, winter kill. With our mechanical methods like roller crimping, mowing, those are going to be most successful after they reach reproductive or flowering stage. If you're using herbicides, you need to make sure that your cover crop is actively growing so that we get that herbicide absorbed and translocated throughout the plant. Clovers are not especially easy to kill with glyphosate alone, so we're going to have to do a mix there. Really thick mats of covers, like cereal rye or a mix, can be tough to completely kill with a roller crimper. So sometimes that's used in partnership with herbicide. For beginning cover crop users, sometimes the easiest thing is to just have a winter kill cover crop. So something like oats or radish. Crimson clover's fairly easy to kill with herbicide other than glyphosate. And then winter rye is pretty easy to kill with glyphosate. This is a photo of crimson clover in bloom. It'll be like late April in the southern Corn Belt and maybe beginning of May in the central Corn Belt. Termination is relatively easy if mowed or roller crimped after flowering starts, or by using 2,4-D, but we wouldn't want to use glyphosate alone. So you can add some 2,4-D to the mix. Crimson clover was the most used legume cover crop in the National SARE CTIC cover crop survey in 2015 and 2016. The advantages of crimson clover as a cover crop is that it's a true winter annual, so it fits well for fall to spring cover cropping, and it gets off to a fast start. So it could also be frost seeded in the spring and get a good early spring growth. Fall growth is typically more than some of the other legumes when planted mid-fall. If a legume can be planted in the late summer, such as late August or early September, winter peas may get more above ground biomass than crimson clover. It does produce a moderate amount of spring growth, but it's not hard to plant into. It doesn't tend to tangle up on a planter like hairy vetch. And it also doesn't have the hard seed issue of vetch. Disadvantages: it doesn't overwinter as far north as some legumes, and doesn't survive as well on poorly drained soils. Soil type should be a significant factor in cover crop selection, not only because soil type and drainage can affect which cover crop will perform well, but also because it may influence farmer goals. So for example, a low organic matter soil may benefit more from a high biomass cover crop than one that already has good organic matter. So just for example, some species like crimson clover are going to do better with really good soil drainage. Sandy soils, we might be looking at a cover crop to build organic matter and hold it from erosion. Clay pan soils may need a strong rooting cover crop like annual ryegrass or something like with a taproot like sunflower or radishes. Low fertility soils may benefit from a legume, but we need to watch our pH there. Grasses are typically better at tolerating acidic soils, better than the clovers and other legumes. Sloping fields, we're going to really be looking at those erosion reducing cover crops, something fast growing like cereal rye. And then saline soils can be a challenge, but barley is typically a good fit in those situations. So here's an example of oilseed radishes. They normally winter kill through the Corn Belt. When the radish dies, the top growth starts to decompose, and it has a relatively low seed-to-N ratio. So it'll also contribute to accelerated decomposition of any corn or soybean stalks still left on the surface. So that leaves a pretty clean surface in the spring. So some farmers plan to plant their corn seeds next to the radish row to take advantage of the bare soil strip and also that nutrient dense zone where the radishes have decomposed. And those holes left by the decomposed radishes typically disappear by planting time, even in no-till fields, but depending on rainfall and soil type. But of course, if those are still present, you would want to offset your cash crop row to avoid that. This is one of the reasons we typically don't recommend radishes alone, because they decompose so quickly and leave the soil so friable and loose and erosive that it can wash away and cause some problems in the spring. Matching the cover crop to the cash crop rotation is one challenging but interesting aspect of selecting cover crops. It's best to avoid having plants from the same family in rotation, such as all grasses or all legumes. Ideally, you'd have a grass cover crop before soybeans and a broadleaf cover crop before corn. That's just from a disease management standpoint. But with mixes or for other reasons, it may be hard to totally avoid that. So again, try to have a diverse rotation. One thing we can do to really help is to add wheat to a corn-soy rotation in combination with cover crops. That can especially give us a little more time in those northern areas. We may want to adjust cash crop planting dates. And we need to be really mindful of our herbicides and the date of application on those. Cover crop mixes are a great way to add biodiversity. If you're grazing with your cover crop, that could also influence some of the choices that you're going to be making. As far as cover crop selection, I'd like to walk you through the Midwest Cover Crops Council Cover Crop Decision Tool. We feel that it's a really nice way to help you maybe eliminate some species as options and learn about some other possibilities. So this is available at our website, midwestcovercrops.org. And it's available for the entire North Central region. So you'll start by putting in your state or province and then your county. So what that will do is that pulls 30 years of climate data in the background of the tool to give you customized seeding dates for your area. From there, you can tell us what your goals are. You can put in up to 3, and we will rate those cover crops based on those 3 goals, and you can go through and see the kind of pros and cons to each of those. You can also tell us what your cash crop planting and harvest dates are so that we can remind you that you've got a crop in the field, and you may have to do some interseeding if you wanted to plant a cover crop in that window. We'll also take into account your soil drainage classification and help eliminate any cover crops that might not tolerate the soil drainage in your field. So once you enter in all of that information, you'll get a display that looks something like this. The green bars show reliable cover crop establishment for your county based on 30 years of climate data. So you'll see that there's lots of options there. And as we get later in the fall, there are fewer and fewer options. The yellow bar is freeze or moisture risk to establishment. So that's where we're counting on you to use your expertise to kind of read the season and understand, is this an okay time to plant? What does the forecast look like? Do I want to risk it? So that can help you make some decisions there. The kind of blue shading over that seeding chart is your planting and harvest dates for your cash crop. So that is simply a reminder that, hey, you have a cash crop in the field. You're going to have to wait until that is harvested before you like run a drill through the field. This is just a close-up so you can kind of see some of the details here. You'll see that each of the cover crops have you'll see the 2s and 3s, the 1, 2, 4 on there next to the cover crop species names. Those are ratings for the goals that you would select. So you can see here a few of the cover crops have that kind of red caution with the exclamation point next to them. Those just mean they are not suitable for the conditions that you've entered into the tool. So if you were to hover over that, you can read that, for example, winter barley is not suitable under poorly drained conditions. So if you were to enter poorly drained conditions, winter barley would not be suggested. And then you can continue to read there that winter barley is ranked 4 as an erosion fighter, and so on. So based on your seeding window, your cash crop management, your goals, and your soil drainage, we're going to help you filter through a list of cover crops to find something that would hopefully work for you. As you would like to learn more about a cover crop, you'll see that list of species there. They're actually hyperlinks. And so all you have to do is click on any of those species names and we'll take you to an information sheet. And this is a full sheet that gives you all kinds of information, which includes planting information. So your seeding rates, seeding depths, any cautions, quirky things about the species. There's potential advantages, potential disadvantages, cultural traits, all listed under those links through the tool. So that is a great way to explore some cover crop options that you have. We've really designed that to be a learning tool so that you can kind of walk through the decision process on your own and take into consideration, you know, all the things that are important to you or the farmer that you're working with. If you're maybe working with a farmer who says, okay, I'm convinced that cover crops are a good thing, just tell me how to get started. We've developed some cover crop recipes. These are available for each of the 12 Midwestern states, and we've got a couple Canadian ones as well. And these are specific to your crop rotation and your state. So it's going to go through and give you a low risk entry point into getting started with cover crops. It's going to walk you through, what do I think about, you know, ahead of cover crop planting? What do I do in the fall? What am I going to be looking to do in the spring? What are the management concerns? Just really a nice step-by-step process of how to get started with cover crops. And those are also available on our website. Cover crop seed cost is a factor that's always on farmers' minds, especially those using cover crops for the first time. Seed cost may be completely covered by some incentive programs from state or federal government and others. But regardless of whether the incentive payments are available, keeping seed costs moderate will be a priority for most farmers. Although the temptation is to buy the cheapest source of seed, it's important to remember and stress to your producers that good quality seed is worth the investment, just like your commodity crop seed. Getting clean, weed-free seed with high germination percentage, so 85% or above, is very important. You should recommend to your farmers that they ask their dealer if the seed has a seed tag, so that'll include the germination percentage, percentage of weed seed and foreign material. There are a lot of cover crop seed out there that's VNS, or variety not stated. However, there are improved cultivars that are becoming more available for cover crop use every year. And in a lot of cases, it can really pay to select an improved variety that has proven performance, will be uniform in the way it behaves in the field, and just easier to manage in general. So we really recommend that you order your seed early. From year to year, seed availability really fluctuates. And so we want to make sure that we have that seed available. Check early. Inoculate legumes. We also need to keep that inoculum cool. Mixes of species can have pluses, but some of those are going to be a little more expensive. So we need to keep an eye on those costs as well. You can always consider applying for government cost share programs. And then, like we said before, invest in your cover crop like you would your cash crop. Buy good seed, plant it in an effective way, pay attention and be a good manager. Sources of cover crop seed. There are lots of companies who are specializing in cover crop seed sales. Some of these might be forage seed companies. There are local seed warehouses and seed retailers, ag retailers like fertilizer dealers, and other farmers. When buying from other farmers, be sure that the seed has recently been tested for germination percent. Ask for a seed tag or seed test showing percent foreign material, weed seed, noxious weeds, and percent germ. Be aware of transport restrictions across state lines from some sellers. And it's good to buy named varieties. Sometimes it's difficult to know what you're getting. Well, you don't know what you're getting with a VNS or variety not stated. Buying cover crop mixes. Some companies sell only prepackaged sets of cover crop mixes, or they may sell only individual species. And then there are other companies who can do custom blends. So some tips on mixes, make sure and check your seeding rates. You need to cut back your seeding rate to reflect the total number of species. So we need to be mindful of plants per acre or plants per square foot, and not necessarily have the same seeding rate as an individual species might have. Ask about the inoculation on legumes. It's always best to order inoculum separate, keep it cool, like in a refrigerator after you received it, and then stir it in shortly before planting. It may work to have the seed company do it as long as it's kept in cool weather and done shortly before shipping. And then again, the seed will need to be stored in a cool, dry place. Seed segregation can be a problem with mixes. Sometimes we see it worse when it's two species of round seeds that are of similar size. Typically, if you're using 3 or more species and some different sizes and types of seed, it doesn't segregate quite as bad. Still, we want to check and make sure that that's not happening. That seed needs to be remixed after we've traveled with that seed and make sure that it's not segregating. All right, many different cover crops are available today and more are coming on the market. It pays to match the cover crop selected to the specific needs of the field. So hopefully we've given you some good resources to make those decisions today. And please check our website for more information. Thank you.